Hi, this is Dr. Gregory Sadler. I'm a professor of philosophy and the president and founder of an educational consulting company called Reason.io, where we put philosophy into practice. I've studied and taught philosophy for over 20 years, and I find that many people run into difficulties reading classic philosophical texts. Sometimes it's the way things are said or how the text is structured. But the concepts themselves are not always that complicated, and that's where I come in. To help students and lifelong learners, I've been producing longer lecture videos and posting them to YouTube. Many viewers say they find them useful. What you're currently watching is part of a new series of shorter videos, each of them focused on one core concept from an important philosophical text. I hope you find it useful as well. In the course of his work on fate, where Cicero is discussing whether everything is in fact determined or whether we have some measure of freedom of choice or of the will, he discusses something that has been called by convention the idle argument. It already had a name by the time that Cicero encounters it, both in Greek and in Latin. In Greek, it is the argos logos, and in Cicero's Latin, it is the ignava ratio. And when we say argument here, you don't necessarily want to think of something in syllogistic form, but think of a line of argumentation really having to do with our practical reasoning about what we ought to do or what we ought not to do. And it's interesting if you put it that way, because it's really saying, as its conclusion, don't do anything, because nothing that you do makes any difference. Or, if you want the opposite of that, do whatever you want, because nothing you do makes any difference. And how do we get there? So Cicero is going to give us a formulation of this that has to do with somebody being sick. And the question is, should they call for the doctor or not? And notice that both sides of the argument begin with the same if-then statement. If it is fated, and then something follows after that, then, and then something follows after that. So what are the two sides? If it's fated for you to recover from this illness, then you will recover from the illness, whether you bring in a doctor or not. And you could expand this to other things, whether you consult WebMD, whether you lay in bed all day, or whether you go out drinking. No matter what you do, if you're fated to recover from that illness, you will recover from that illness. On the other hand, the statement runs, if it's fated for you to not recover from that illness, then you won't recover from that illness, and that holds whether you bring in a doctor or don't bring in a doctor. We could extend this to other things as well. Again, maybe you bring in a doctor, but you don't listen to the doctor's advice. We could go on and on and on. And you could say this about other things too. Think about whether you're going to find the person who is the ideal mate for you. If you're going to find that person, it doesn't matter whether you go out on dates or not, you will find that person if it's fated. And if it's fated that you won't find that person, then it doesn't matter how many dates you go on, you'll never find that person. And so what is the conclusion of this? Do whatever you want. Don't do anything. It doesn't matter what you do, because it's already fated that it's going to go one way or another. So nothing that you as a human agent can do within the situation will actually make any contribution to a different outcome. So given most people's propensity towards a sort of laziness and indolence, Cicero actually says you can not only call this the ignava ratio, but also the inerrs, meaning just going to sit there doing nothing. This is an argument for doing nothing, an argument for, as we called it, fatalism. And people have this sort of view about all sorts of things in their life. Cicero goes on to note another feature of this. You could take the word fate out of it altogether if you wanted to. You could say, for example, if the statement, you will recover from that illness, has been true from all eternity, you'll recover whether you call in a doctor or do not. Similarly, if the statement you will recover from that illness has been false from all eternity, you will not recover whether you call in a doctor or not, and the conclusion will still be the same. So you could take fate out and you could substitute something else in there like destiny or necessity, whatever you like. You could even put God in there. If God has predetermined from all time that you will be a good person, then you don't have to do anything. You're going to be a good person. Or if God has predetermined from all time that you will marry this person and have 16 children, 14 of which will die and 2 of which will go on and do this and that, there's nothing you can do about it. It's just going to happen the way that it does. You're just going to go along with the flow. Now, there are some people who do view things this way, in a very fatalistic manner. Cicero is not one of them, and Chrysippus, the great Stoic philosopher, was not one of them either. If you want to attack this argument, though, you have to make some sort of distinction, and then you have to come to a counter-conclusion about it. You can't just say, well, it's bunk, it's no good. It is a bad argument, but we need to know why that's the case. And so Cicero refers us here to Chrysippus, who is going to make a very important distinction, saying that there's actually 2 different classes or types of what we can translate as facts, or if you like, states of affairs. Res is the Latin for it. So in rebus, in states of affairs or in facts, there are 2 types, one of which is simple, simplicia, right? Straightforward. We don't have to worry about the translation there. The other of which we translate as complex, copulata. We're putting things together. It was the word we get copulate from, where human beings come together and engage in a certain sort of congress. A little bit later, he's going to call those condestinate. He's creating a new word there, con fatalis in Latin. And how does this help us? Well, let's look at some examples of what he means by simple and complex facts. Cicero tells us that an instance of a simple fact is Socrates will die at a given date. Socrates will die tomorrow. Socrates will die 3 weeks from now, whatever it happens to be. I will, in walking across the street, no, actually that would be a complex one, but I will fall down the stairs later today. Anything along those lines is going to be simple. He says, in this case, whether he does some action or does not do it, the day of his death has been determined. He's going to die, right? It doesn't matter whether Socrates watches his cholesterol or goes and exercises or anything like that. He's going to die. And we can think of some other things along those lines. Now, what would be examples of complex facts? Here he's drawing on the Oedipus story, very familiar to people in ancient Greece, perhaps not quite as familiar to us. So let me tell you a very thumbnail sketch of it. Oedipus is a young child about whom there's a prophecy that he's going to kill his father, marry his mother. And this prophecy follows him. He actually leaves his adopted mother and father so that it won't come true, and encounters his father, ends up killing him without recognizing him as his biological father, marries his biological mother, has 4 children, and then there's a curse on the land. The prophet finally reveals to Oedipus that he has committed this terrible sin of incest and patricide, and it goes downhill even further from there. So that's providing us with a instance for this complex fact. And what is the complex fact? It's fated, he says, if it's fated that Laius will have a son Oedipus, it will not be possible for the words whether Laius mates with a woman or does not. In order to have a son Oedipus, of course he's got to have sex with a woman. I mean, there's other ways around it. You could say, well, what about a petri dish? Or all sorts of other things. Yes, but then you're just substituting some other, provided that he does this phrase, that brings these things together, that brings simple facts together into a complex. So he says, the matter is complex and condestinate. He gives that name to it because he thinks it's fated both that Laius will lie with a wife and that he will beget Oedipus by her. He uses another example of this famous wrestler Milo. He says, Milo will wrestle at Olympia. Simple fact or a complex fact? Seems like a simple fact, but there's actually something that's required there, right? Milo will wrestle at Olympia, whether he has an opponent or not. No, he's not going to wrestle without an opponent. So that is a complex fact. And we can look at the Argos logos like that. Cicero draws the conclusion here. He says, all arguments of that sort can be refuted in the same way. You will recover whether you call in a doctor or not is, as he calls it, captiosum. For calling in a doctor is just as much fated as recovering. So Chrysippus views all of those as condestinate, all of those as fated. But we could go a little bit further than Cicero's going here and think about the implications. If you know that, you've got an illness and you say, well, it's fated that if I'm going to die. Maybe the doctor is how you prevent yourself from dying. Maybe that is one of those other facts that needs to come into it. Maybe you choosing, now Cicero would say you don't actually have a choice, not Cicero, Chrysippus would say it's destined already that you're going to call the doctor. Cicero would say, well, you've got a choice whether you call the doctor or not, right? Call the doctor, maybe you won't die. If you don't call the doctor, probably you will die. If it's fated that you're going to die because you don't call the doctor, maybe not having that medical advice and following the treatment is in fact exactly why you die. It's one of the causes of you dying. Just as Laius cannot engender or beget Oedipus without actually having sex with a woman. If Laius says, I'll have a child no matter what I do, if you follow this idle argument, well, he doesn't have sex, then there's no Oedipus. So the idle argument is really what we call a sophism, but it's one that has to do with practical life. And Cicero here is concerned with combating a certain kind of fatalism that would keep us from doing anything or choosing anything under the guise, you could say, of saying that everything is already determined ahead of time, so we make no contribution. Cicero thinks we actually do make some sort of contribution. Chrysippus thinks that all of these things are fated, but we have conjoint causes that then wind up in these complex states of affairs.